Smaulgld.
Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Sunday, the 27th of January 2019, and tonight's topic, gold battle, Russian central bank versus India. Last night we covered the Indian silver imports through November 2018, and tonight we're going to take a look at Indian gold imports through November 2018. We're going to compare them also to the Russian central bank record gold additions to their reserves in 2018. But first, let's take a quick look at the markets. We're also going to go through some crypto stories. We're going to take a look at some ongoing stories about the border wall, things going on in Venezuela. Then we're going to hit Moronica. And then we're going to get into the topic of the evening. So hello, everyone. Hello, Smaulgld game changers. Good to have you with us tonight. Let's take a look at gold price. Down a little bit, down to 29, or not 29, 12.99.30. That's off $3. It's off $3.30. Silver at $15.69. That's down 2 cents. Everything seems to be off in the evening trade. Crude oil down to 53.24, down 45 cents. The dollar holding steady. The dollar index at 95.75. Over on the cryptocurrencies, not much movement either. Bitcoin at 35.30. That's down 0.6%. No movement there. Ethereum down $111.30. That is just down 2.86%. And Bitcoin Cash, Bcash at 120. That's down a little bit more, about 3.5%. And Litecoin, just under $32, down 1.13%. Okay, well, let's get into some of the stories that we have for you tonight. And then we'll get into this Indian versus Russian gold battle. All right, let's see what we got here for you in terms of images. You guys like to watch as I speak to what I throw up here. So let's see what I'm going to throw up first. Here's an interesting story. I want to talk about this story just briefly. It's kind of a sad story, and I don't know how it turned out, but there's this woman here. Her name is Samantha Smith. And somehow she has some very odd health issue where I think it's her head weight is, she's got some issues with her spine and it's crushing her neck, and it's eventually not going to be good for her. And she lives, I believe, in the United Kingdom. So she raised 250,000 quid to go to the United States for a operation at a private clinic in Arizona. I guess the National Health wasn't going to cover this type of life-saving operation. So she had a Barclays bank account, according to the story, and she sent the money in order to have the, she had to reserve her position to get her scheduled. She went to Arizona. I guess she probably was going to stay there a few days and then come home, and the bank didn't send the money. Even though she had supposedly told them in advance she was sending this money, a large amount of money, over to cover the operation in this private clinic in Arizona. They didn't send it, which means they weren't going to do her operation, and she had a big problem with the bank. They're looking into it, all that kind of stuff, and essentially, I believe the story, we'll try to update this story, was she was waiting to see if they would actually send the money so that she can reschedule her appointment to get it done before she's scheduled to come back to the United Kingdom on her ticket. So this is just another case of, the banks, it's not your money. They decide whether they're going to send it to you. When it's in somebody else's custody, they decide for whatever reason they're not sending it. They've got to look into something. There's some type of issue. Now, you could say, well, that's for her safety. That's for her benefit. Well, in this case, no, it's not. Because it's going to harm her. And according to the story, she had warned them in advance or notified them in advance that she was sending this money. But of course, they found irregularities or whatever. And again, this is a use case for cryptocurrencies in this case, because on the flip side of cryptocurrencies, there's no chargebacks, but no one's going to stop you if you want to send your cryptocurrency in advance somewhere, especially in a large amount. It's going to go through and it'll be confirmed. So we'll try to find out what happened to this woman, Samantha Smith, and see if she managed to get her surgery done and the money sent so she can get it done before she was scheduled to go back to the United Kingdom. here's an interesting crypto story. Just talking about adoption. We've been talking about ATMs and how they may have an impact on adoption and how there's more and more of them in the United States. Now, Coinstar has opened up their 20,000 machines, and they're going to start adding the option to buy Bitcoin on those. But here's one. Samsung's new Galaxy 10 S10 could give a surprise boost to Bitcoin. And what they're talking about is that supposedly that new phone is going to come preloaded with a Bitcoin wallet. Most people, you know, they might not even use the wallet. They may not even see the wallet. But it does come to a point where some people see it. They may realize that it's a feature. Even if you get a small uptick, you know, they sell tens of millions of these phones, and only a small percentage even see the wallet, open the wallet. Again, it could lead to, according to this Forbes guy, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but he thinks it's a big boost for Bitcoin adoption. I don't think so. I think if you get a phone and it has preloaded software, unless you're looking for that preloaded software, you don't see it. If you're already interested in Bitcoin, you're going to go out, and as soon as you get the phone and load your own software on there. I'm not sure this is going to be a big boost, but I mention it because sometimes I'm wrong. Maybe it is a big deal. Not sure. All right. Now, on the wall, give you a quick update here. Let's see. What is that? No, we're not going to put that one up. Yeah, this one is a Judge Napolitano take, which I'm not very impressed with his legal reasoning on many things. He generally likes to state things categorically as if he has the answer. And let's quickly go through what might happen on the wall. The Democrats don't want a wall. The Republicans want a wall. We now have a 3-week period over which they're supposed to discuss border security, and you can pretty much tell it's going to come out. The Democrats are going to say, oh, we're in favor of border security, but we don't think we need a wall. We need this, we need that, and the wall doesn't solve anything, and they're going to even up the amount in the budget for border security, but it won't include a wall. Trump is going to say a wall is a central part of the whole border security, and therefore, if they don't get a wall, it's going to go down to, after 3 weeks, if they don't get a wall, Trump is going to declare a national emergency, and he's going to say, military, go in there and build a wall. Well, I saw this thing with Judge Napolitano, and he categorically states that Trump cannot declare a national emergency and build his border wall. And he cites, and again, he's supposed to be a lawyer and a judge, he cites, in a word, no. Okay, so it's all down to one word, no. And he said, that's not me saying no, because the Supreme Court said no when Harry Truman attempted to do that. Harry Truman did not attempt to build a wall on the southern border. What he's referring to was when Harry Truman tried to nationalize the steel industry on the basis of national security. Totally different thing. He's seizing private property. He's going right into a company, and the United States at the time did not have direct contracts with the steel company to buy steel, so it wasn't even a case where they could say they can declare the emergency that the company needs to send us the steel. It was just a general statement. He wanted to seize the steel industry so that the steel industry, the plant couldn't go on strike. Now, he's right. There is a precedent there that the Supreme Court could step in. By the way, it was a 5-4 decision, different court makeup back then, and different set of facts. I mean, one thing about law is it's called reasoning by analogy, and every analogy is different. And in this case, it's different in a very significant way. The wall is not the same thing as seizing an entire industry in the United States, or the largest steel mills that Truman wanted to nationalize. Now, Napolitano may have a point, but he didn't make it. The point is, and this is probably where, remember, in order to bring a case, you have to have a thing called standing. Now, it's pretty obvious who would have standing in a case of the steel mill. The people who own the steel mill, the shareholders, the managers, they have standing to say, hey, Truman, hands off of our steel mill. It's ours. We own it, private property, and so on. Obviously, they tried to stop Truman from nationalizing their steel mill, and they were successful. Now, in this case, with the wall, as you could say, well, hold on a minute. There's different facts here. Building the wall has got nothing to do with seizing anyone's property. But maybe it does. And this is probably how the Democrats will attack this. They'll find somebody with standing, somebody who owns property along the border that may be subject to eminent domain. Now, if Trump is smart, he may have already sorted this all out. They may have already purchased all the land, in which case, then the Napolitano idea that it can be stopped may not work. I'm actually trying to help his argument here that the Supreme Court case that stood for the proposition that the president can't declare an emergency and seize somebody's property unless Congress approves may apply to an eminent domain type of case. And that could easily happen if they try to build a wall and they just roll right in there and they say, okay, Jackson, you're out of here, eminent domain, and we're building the wall. Well, the Supreme Court may have a problem with that and cite the Steele case. However, if there is no eminent domain, the case in which Napolitano says, in a word, no, is not really a direct analogy. It is really not, it doesn't stand for the precedent that the president can't declare an emergency and the Supreme Court is automatically going to shut it down because they shut down Harry Truman when he tried to nationalize the steel mills. But we'll see how it rolls out. But I don't think that Napolitano gave that one much justice. It almost seems like he tries to go out there and make his point, and then he adds legality to it after the fact rather than starting with the legal analysis and coming up with his conclusion. He sounds like he starts from a conclusion and then applies the law to it. And I think that's very similar to what we see a lot in the gold and silver community. They start with the concept that gold and silver are set to skyrocket or Bitcoin's going to change the world. And then they try to find facts or analysis that matches that conclusion. I think that's what Judge Angelo Napolitano did. Stasera or ieri sera, whenever he was saying all this stuff. Okay, let's move on now to Venezuela. Now, Venezuela, a lot of people are out there. I mean, this is what happens when you have the mentality that gold is the only important thing in the world and that United States doesn't have any gold, which doesn't make a stitch of sense. United States has no gold. They don't have any gold, and China has a lot of gold. And the United States is stupid because they don't understand gold, and Chinese are smart. And they read Sun Tzu, and Sun Tzu says all this garbage about somehow the world being smart or not smart because they have gold, don't have gold, understand gold. And the other thing is, the same people that say there's no gold at Fort Knox are constantly harping on the fact the United States just prints money. Well, if they print up a lot of money, don't you think they could go out and buy gold if they didn't have any? But putting that aside, there's now people saying out there in the gold community, the United States is coming up with pretext and they want to invade Venezuela to take their gold, just like they did in all these other countries. As if the United States really needs to spend a fortune on military hardware to go get a few tons of gold. It doesn't make any sense. But keep in mind that the Venezuelan gold isn't even in Venezuela. So the whole concept is stupid. If they want to go into Venezuela, it's got nothing to do with gold. It has everything to do with oil. That's what would have something to do with. And then, of course, they can complain humanitarian, whatever pretext they want. But it's not to go in and get 20 or 40 tons worth of gold. It doesn't make a stitch of sense for them to even think that way. But, again, you know who we're dealing with here. All right, what else do we got here? Yeah, in response, I'm not going to go through all this. What always intrigues me about the BS no gold at Fort Knox story is if it's true, what's stopping the United States from rebuilding its gold reserves? The United States can print up money at will, has domestic gold mining. As we'll see, you can import, as India's done often, 900 tons of gold a year with no impact on the gold price. Why couldn't the United States, if somehow it didn't have the gold, it leased it all out, or whatever nonsense they're talking about, why couldn't they just go out and get it? The United States is so powerful, can print money at will, $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities, $22 trillion deficit. They can't find a few $100 billion for 4,000 tons of gold? It doesn't make any sense. That story has always disturbed me, and the only reason they put it out there is, and what happens when they find out there's no gold at Fort Knox? It's, quote, game over, game changer. All the BS that you hear from that doesn't make any sense here. And I guess pleased to see Ronan Manley. He writes for what is that place out there in Singapore? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Bullion Star. he says exactly, there's nothing stopping the United States from building gold reserves. And he says U.S. Treasury would be foolish not to have been covertly accumulating gold. Now, he's already on the assumption that there isn't any gold at Fort, not that there's any gold at Fort Knox, but that the United States is maybe accumulating more. It's on the theory that the United States probably needs even more than what's at Fort Knox. If they've done so, it's been a very secretive program, strong arm confiscation, convert buying, convert mining, etc. I don't agree with that, but what I do agree with is if the United States wanted to get gold, it's not like it's some kind of static situation where China is buying gold. They are smart, and the United States has no gold, and they are stupid. You don't think if the United States thought, and maybe they don't, that it's important to have gold, that they couldn't accumulate gold? And as Ronan points out here, of course they can go out. He's saying they have some secretive program. I just think they have what they say they have, and they're not interested in getting any more. But if they didn't have what they have, they can easily get that amount back, and they can easily add more to that. And I mentioned, keep in mind, Russia's gold hoard is 2,000 tons. But how much is 2,000 tons worth of gold in today's prices? $90 billion, peanuts. What that is like a couple of months worth of QE. They can print that up and go out and buy that gold. Oh no, but then the price would rise. Not true. As we mentioned, India buys about 1,000 tons of gold each year on the open market. United States mines about 250 tons of gold a year. There's easily ways, if the United States thought it was so important, because it would be game over, a game changer, if somehow the world found out they didn't have the gold, well, they can easily go out and get it. Really doesn't make much sense for this whole argument. And I say it makes zero sense to be spouting the U.S. has no gold. If it's important to have it, the U.S. can print dollars, they can mine it, or even invade other countries. That's what a lot of people say. Well, that's why they invade all these countries. Okay, so if they've invaded these countries over the past 20 years, haven't they stolen their gold? Where do you think that gold goes? It goes into the gold that the United States says it has. That's a story that people repeat, and when they repeat it, they say it in a very smug way, like, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, I have more gold than the U.S. has. You really think that? You really think the United States is the most powerful nation on earth, can bomb any country into the Stone Age, can print dollars at will, can run up multi-trillion-dollar deficits, and somehow it can't manage to have 8,000 tons of gold? It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, this guy makes a good point. He says, I believe it's there, but I would like to know if the gold actually belongs to us or has been lent out or sold. Now, that's a good question, but even so, with the ability to control the paper gold market, they would be crazy not to, but the real metal and ever devalued value. Okay, here's where he's absolutely right. But I respond, even if that gold has been lent out from time to time in order to manipulate the market, that's different than insisting the United States doesn't either own the gold or own the value of that gold, which means if it's leased out, that means the people who have got it have to give it back. So where's the problem? Now, if you want to argue that the United States manipulates the gold price, I'm not going to argue with you there. That's obvious that they do that. I don't even think they need to use the gold in Fort Knox to do it, but it doesn't matter. The idea that the United States just doesn't have 8,000 tons of gold is ridiculous. Why wouldn't they have it? If they have it to lease out, it makes even more sense then. They have it to lease out. No, but China is smart, and Sun Tzu, and China is lying, and China has 20,000 tons of gold, and they're going to roll it out into a stadium and say, show us yours, and then it's going to be game over and game. Total rubbish. I don't know. Those are stories that people want to believe, and if they thought them through, they don't make a stitch of sense. And as we mentioned the other night, the amount of gold that China has or says they have, or give them the benefit of the doubt and add all the gold that happens to be somehow physically located in China, add it to the Chinese balance sheet, does nothing really to alleviate the fact that they got $40 trillion worth of debt. That gold isn't worth that much, even if you increase the price tenfold. All right. Got to come back to that every now and then because people believe that story. They insist on that story. No gold at Fort Knox. China is smart. Sun Tzu says. All right. Well, I believe now. That should have been moronic, but I got something even more moronic than that. So let's take a listen. Uh-oh. We got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent.
This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
All right. Well, the other night we were talking about how New York City has decided that anyone and everyone, legal status, non-legal status, has the right to free health care in the city. And that New York State has now passed a bill that they think Andrew Cuomo is going to sign that allows illegal immigrants to have free access to financial scholarships for school and to get into college, in addition to having already been through the public school system. Now, a lot of this largesse, you could argue, you can, not necessarily should, because if you give away public funds to anyone who comes, eventually you're not going to have a surplus. But the problem in New York State, New York City, it doesn't have massive surpluses. And then this story highlights the people in New York City don't have massive surpluses. They are the most financially distressed city in the nation. And they're talking about the levels of debt that people have in New York City. Most large numbers of people, millions, do not have the money, more than $400 saved. They don't have money for a crisis, and they have a lot of debt. Now, how then can those citizens that live in New York City that are strapped be able to fund not only their own citizens, but whoever else happens to be in their city, because de Blasio says, yeah, they all deserve it, we got to give it to them. And I guess that ties us into our next view, which is de Blasio is saying, the mayor of New York, that there's a lot of money in New York City, but it's in the wrong hands. So he wants to redistribute that. So I guess he doesn't care about the normal taxpayer, doesn't make a lot of money, doesn't have more than $400 in savings. Even though they're burdened, he figures, well, maybe he'll get it from the rich people. Well, here goes Dizzy Miss Lizzie, same concept. Now, we talked about her the other day. We did a whole show, not a whole show, but it was the topic of the show. And we were talking about how she was saying that people with over 50 million in assets, they should be taxed because they don't need it, and it's going to pay for all of her programs. And of course, she's got between $5 and $8 million in assets, but somehow that is not at the threshold. And we discussed how everyone always thinks somebody who makes more than them is rich, but they never consider themselves rich. So she is a multimillionaire complaining about those who have tens of millions. These people have $50 million. They don't deserve it. Now, she gave an example about this. She gave an example how a football guy who owns a football team, he just recently bought a $100 million yacht, and that just pissed her off. She's saying, hey, he doesn't need that $100 million yacht. I'm sure he can pay for she called it my multi-millionaire's tax. Now, why would that person want to do that? And besides, it makes no sense. We discussed last night that if you really are a statist and you really want the state to do well, well, then you want to get as many people to accumulate $50 million in assets, and you want to get as many people making millions of dollars so that you can collect millions of dollars in income tax. And you also want to be very careful that you don't have a disincentive for people to create that income. And also, you don't want to create an incentive or disincentive for people to actually buy stuff so that they have $50 million worth of assets. And you certainly don't want them just sitting on their money, because most of these people are Keynesians. They think that spending drives the economy. Well, what's better than a guy with $50 million or an income of $20 million a year going out and buying stuff like yachts? What does that do? It hires people who work to make the yachts. It hires people to work on the yacht. The caterers. I mean, it creates an enormous amount of wealth. And if you give that disincentive, then people won't build yachts, and all the jobs that are involved around the creation of the yachts, the fueling of the yachts. I guess that's global warming. They don't like that. Doesn't bother them for their private jets. But all of that wealth and all that activity does not get created, which means all those people that work in those industries, they don't make the money, they don't pay the taxes. So it doesn't make sense what she's doing. It only appeals to it's a non-economic argument. It actually appeals to the emotional argument that why should he have all that money? Yeah, okay, I get that. Now, I agree with that, not because I'm emotional about it, but if somebody has a lot of money that they didn't earn, then it should be taxed at 125%, like maybe some congressmen and senators who leave Congress and the Senate richer than when they entered it, which means they didn't earn that money. Somehow they did something to get more money than their salary would dictate. Or if somebody gets a bailout. I don't think if you get a bailout from the government, or you get some type of special treatment, like a subsidy, then you should pay a higher tax on it, because you've been given something that you didn't earn. You've been given something that you didn't earn that you've only got because of your proximity to somebody willing to give it to you, Like when Warren Buffett got a bailout. He should have. That's the only time I get mad and say you should tax them. But if someone goes out and creates a product or service that actually people want or like, whether I like or want it or not is irrelevant, and people are going to buy it and they're going to pay for it, supposedly they've enriched your life. So you enrich that person's life for having creative. I like to use the example of Subway sandwich. I don't like Subway sandwich, but a lot of people like Subway sandwiches, and if you can go in and buy a cheap sandwich for $5, that person has made it easier in your life. You're willing to pay the $5 for the sandwich. No one's forcing you to buy it. And if the person who created the Subway franchise makes 40, 50, 80, $100 million, I don't care. That's good. People gave him their money voluntarily. And if he wants to blow it on a yacht, I don't think Dizzy Miss Lizzie should say he's got to pay some extra tax, because he's already paid tax on all the income he's earned from creating the Subway franchise. Now, if you really, and you can get personal here, but Dizzy Miss Lizzie, I'm sure she lives in a fine home. She's got $5 to $8 million worth of assets. Why aren't we taxing her assets? Why is it okay to tax somebody at $50 million, but not $5 to $8 million? I mean, clearly, she's got stuff in her house that she doesn't need. She's got extra beers that she probably practiced that beer drinking thing on TV a few times, so she probably wasted beer. All that should be taxed. See, once you start with this, oh, we're going to tax somebody else, I don't give it any credibility until you say, yeah, I don't think anybody should have this stuff, and I live in this really expensive house in Massachusetts. I don't think I should have this, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go live in public housing. I'm going to give my beer away. I'm going to give all my assets away, or I'll pay the tax on them. And yeah, okay, if you want to believe that, go ahead, have at it. Don't make everyone else believe it, but don't force other people to do stuff that you're not doing. It's really, it doesn't make any sense as an economic argument, and it doesn't make any sense at all. It just smacks, to me, it is moronic. All right, let's move on from that. And then people think, oh, you're defending rich people. No, it's got nothing to do with defending. It's actually, if you don't defend the principle, then it can come right down to you. Then they can say, well, you have 2 cars. Why aren't you paying taxes? And then it becomes the mob rule. Anyone who has anything is rich and it deserves to be taken from them. And all right, now let's move into our Indian gold versus Russian gold reserves battle. Now, I like to talk about India a lot in terms of silver, in terms of gold, because they are huge, big consumers of both metals. If you haven't heard last night's show on Indian silver, I'm not going to repeat what we discussed last night, but very important points and some data and some charts on Indian silver imports. Very big year for Indian silver imports in India. This year, Indian gold imports, not bad, but every year, Indian gold imports aren't bad. Indian gold imports, however, are hampered by not just the price, but also because India has a 10% duty on imports of gold into India, and they have like some 5% jewelry tax. They have all kinds of taxes. But Indians go nuts for gold, and they're always going to want it, and they're very price sensitive about gold. The price goes up, they're not going to buy it as much. The price goes down, obviously they're going to buy more. Now, 2017 versus 2018. What I do in these charts, it's a little hard to follow, but not really. The only numbers that I put in are the ones in which the winning month, meaning if in 2018, which is the red, 2017, which is the blue, if your, or 1 year, particular year's month 1 got more imports that year, then that number gets shown. So for example, November, all the way to the far right, 2017, that was 79 tons that were imported last November, 2017 November, and fewer gold imports occurred in November 2018. But now in August of 2018, there were more gold imports than 2017 in August, and it was 95 tons. Now keep in mind, India has zero, pretty much effectively zero gold mining, so they import all their gold. Now, India has like 25,000 tons, they say, in the country. It's not at the central bank or the Reserve Bank of India. It's in, I think they say, 4,000 tons in Indian temples, and the rest is all scattered around the country. Indian farmers, Indian people, women, children, whoever has it, it's all in their hands. They've been buying gold for thousands of years. It's part of the culture. They know it's a store of value. They know it's pretty. It's just what they want. Even though in recent times they've been trying to sell them digital gold, and the yuppies in India and the large cities are buying digital gold, but supposedly it's like gold money, these services that they have, that it is backed by. You may never see it, but you own the gold through your cell phone, and they credit you with a certain amount of gold. You can buy gold in India. There's a lot of different ways. Gold is much more intertwined in the economy. Indeed, gold imports could make up 10, 15, up to 20% of overall imports. You don't get that in the United States. You don't get that pretty much anywhere else, where gold is a major portion of the economy. You see it. They have places to buy it. There's government initiatives to get you to buy gold through them, to get you to lend them gold. I mean, it is clearly a gold country. That is because Indians are smart. They know the value of gold. Okay. But you see here, this year is not as big of a year as last year. Let me show you some other charts. No. Yeah, let me show you this. This is a little more granular chart. This shows, by the way, I get the data from Nick Laird, but then I produce my own charts from the data that he pulls. I just like he's got so many charts. I don't reproduce all of his charts. What I do is I subscribe to his service, and for India, I use his data and make my own charts rather than using his charts. Now, for some of the other countries, I pull my own data, like Russia, Kazakhstan gold reserves. But for Shanghai Gold Exchange, I use Nick Laird's data. For the COMEX data, I use his data. And sometimes I commission Nick to make me special charts. I haven't done that recently. But anyway, Nick Laird, Gold Charts Are Us, great service if you're really interested in not just being spoon-fed, cherry-picked facts, but you can actually go and research some of the stuff on his site and take a look at all the charts. About $180 a year. Okay, now, Indian gold imports, you can see, pretty strong, other than just like the silver imports. It's hard to tell here, but that middle part, that little dip in there, that was 2016. That's when both gold and silver prices were pretty high. You can see they view commodities like gold and silver, not money, commodities. They have pure value for them. They love the gold and silver, but they know you don't overpay for it. They don't buy it at all costs, but when the price goes down, they see a bargain, they swoop in and they buy it. Now, that's what I like to use gold imports as a barometer for gold demand in India, because they can't get it anywhere else other than the secondary gold that they have that's already in the country, people looking to sell it. But if not enough people are looking to sell any of the 22, 24,000, 25,000 tons that are in the country, then they got to import more, which is what they do each and every year. Let's take a look at what they do each and every year. Bingo, right there. Look at that. This now shows, yeah, it's very consistent there. And one of the points I like to make is that India imports more and more the richer they get, just because there's more people with money. It is seasonal. If there's a good monsoon season, a lot of the rural Indian farmers will have more rupee. They'll immediately turn that into gold. If they have a good growing season, they sell more crops, they buy more gold. But also, there's more rich people now in India than ever before. Not just farmers, and farmers have no banks, so they use the gold as a store of wealth. Makes total sense. But your Indian city dwellers, they're not relying on the monsoon. They're relying on, maybe they work in a call center, maybe they have a job at a shop. They're making more money. Their business is doing well. They got more money, they're going to buy more gold. And you can see, if you go back to 1999 to 2004, they were only importing about 400 or 500 tons, and now you can see it just keeps creeping up. This year probably won't be as strong as last year. You can see 2016, that dip there, 582 tons. As I mentioned, those were the highest prices you've had since 2011. Well, the prices were going down from 2011, but that was the first time they actually spiked higher. And you can see they slammed the brakes on and they stopped buying. Last couple of years they've been buying. It looks like this year, you got 1 month left, they'll probably get over 800 tons. And that'll put them right around 2013 levels. Still very, very strong amounts of gold being brought into India despite the tariffs and the extra taxes in India. Now, I always say it, but now I finally did a chart to show you. Central banks are buying gold. That is all you need to know. And I am buying gold because central banks are buying. They know what is coming. That whole narrative, they don't buy that much gold. Russia's the only bank that buys any significant amount, and they buy that gold from their own domestic mines. They mine about 300 tons of gold a year. It's the third highest in the world, and they pretty much add about 60 to 80% of that gold to their central bank's reserves. After that, you got Kazakhstan. They're not adding much gold, but they do add it every month, 4 or 5 tons. And then you've had these one-offs, Indian central bank buying 20 or 30 tons, Hungary buying 20, 30 tons, Poland. Now, it's interesting that they're buying it again, but they're not buying large amounts. And this chart shows you really the difference. Now, yes, Russia had a record year in 2018. They added to reserves 262 tons. That's a lot of gold. That's huge for them. The year before, 224. That's in the blue. Year before, 199. 2015, 208 tons. In 2014, 171 tons. All fine and dandy. But that's not the big news. The real gold consumption is coming from a country like Russia, like India, or imports through Hong Kong into China. But the best data we have, because China's a little opaque with its gold coming into China, is these numbers here. These are pretty solid numbers, and the 2018 numbers now, as we mentioned, it's at 718 tons, not 647, but you still get the point that India is importing far more gold than Russia's adding to its gold reserve, and it makes sense. These Russian numbers are only a central bank numbers. They're not an entire population of over 1 billion people. But if you look at this in its proper perspective, add up the green bars and add up the blue bars, and you're looking at a 269% greater amount of gold going into India than is going into the Central Bank of Russia. Add those numbers up, not the 647 in 2018, but 718 tons. Add up the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green bars. That is 3,927 tons of gold that's gone into India in the last 5 years. And only 1,064 tons have gone into the Central Bank of the Central Bank of the Federation of Russia's central bank, right? So, this is another point I make. If India managed to acquire nearly 4,000 tons of gold from 2014 to 2018 with no discernible impact on the gold price, in fact, they bought it because it went down. That is pretty much almost all the gold that's supposedly in Fort Knox. I think Fort Knox has 4,500 tons. So if somehow, and the United States supposedly has 8,100 tons, and then you have to go to other places like West Point and Denver to find the rest of the gold. But if somehow, and I just don't even know why, there wasn't 4,500 tons at Fort Knox, a country like India somehow manages to get 4,000 tons in 5 years. The United States couldn't do that. Doesn't make a stitch of sense to even want to believe that story. It's not because I'm a shill. I don't believe. No, because it doesn't make any sense why the United States wouldn't have any gold. All right, but then here's just a quick other points. I was discussing this with some people. I mentioned Indian and Chinese gold demand the past 10. This is a very good point that Baseball Farmer makes here. Indian and Chinese gold demand during the past 10, 15 years, I argue, is due to wealth increases in heavy jewelry buying and heavy silverware buying in India. Not stacking for the collapse. If there's a collapse, Indian and Chinese would have less money to buy jewelry. Now, he makes a point. No, man, gold is heavily ingrained in the Indian culture. Don't disagree, because they have never trusted governments and banks. That is true. They do store their wealth. They don't just buy the jewelry because it's nice looking, although the silver, I think that's why they buy it. But they buy the gold because they know that it's going to be valuable. They can pass it along from generation to generation. He's absolutely correct. The same in China, but to a lesser degree. He's probably right there, too. They don't have the same historical reason to love gold. They also have a communist government, and there's a different dynamic. He's absolutely right between India and China. However, the wealth expansion you mentioned is just coincidence. Obviously, people want to protect their new savings. And I think we were saying the same thing. So I responded. Nope, that's not the one. That's the conclusion, I think. Let's see here. Yes, so I responded, to your point, Indians always buy gold. He's right. So if you look at an Indian gold import data, they step up their buys when the price is lower and slow down when the price is higher. But they don't seem to panic buy because they're always prepping for gold. I mean, it's just part of they're going to buy gold. In bad times, there's no wealth to protect. So I said to him, we're talking the same concept. More wealth means more wealth to protect, hence gold. Good times create the demand. Bad times, then there's no wealth to protect. So I think we're saying the same thing. And he finally, yes, he agreed. And he was saying that what would happen is in some type of collapse, there'd be panic buying. And I said, no, not in India, there won't. Don't count on Indian gold buying into a crisis with rising prices to boost demand. That's not going to happen. As we've seen, as the price rises, they buy less. They're already prepared for a crisis. They've been accumulating gold their whole life, their whole grandparents' life, or great-grandparents' life. They've just been accumulating. They're not going to rush out and buy at the first sign of trouble. They've been buying. However, rather count on U.S. Western buyers to jump on the train. And then he said that makes sense. So it's a very good point he's making. He's saying that they buy the gold because they know there's a problem. And I'm saying, yeah, you're right. They know there's a problem. It's ingrained that anything that's not gold that you're using to store your value is a problem. So you get rid of those rupees and you buy gold. All right, let's see what you guys have been saying. I got to pitch the mugs first. That's how we pay for the show. And yes, we're going to put back up the various ways to donate. By the way, if you don't have Bitcoin or Litecoin, there is a link, and I'll leave you that, where if you buy through the link that I give you, it's not investment advice to buy Bitcoin or Litecoin or any cryptocurrencies, but if you do decide to buy, if you use the link, you get $10 of credit from Coinbase if you buy $100, and then Smaulgld gets $10 worth of cryptocurrencies, and this way you can now have that cryptocurrency on your wallet. You can store it, and you can donate to content providers, or you can use it to spend in stores, and I'll leave you that one as well. All right, let's get to your comments, and I'm going to put up the details for the Smaulgld patron, PayPal, buy check, and then of course go to smaulgld.com and you can buy your Smaulgld mugs either through Smaulgld directly, classic, super classic mugs, or any of the other mugs through the Smaulgld store. All right, here is the, let's see. That's not going to work. I made a big mistake there. I put a BitChute. I'll be right back in a second. All right, let's see what you guys are saying here in the comments. I try to make sure I pick up the most salient comments, the ones that are interesting. It's very hard to tell. I start reading something and I realize someone in the comments is talking to somebody else in the comments, and then I find another comment and it's just a response to somebody else in the comments. So you have to... I want to get the comments section a little more tightened up so that I can get to your questions, get to your insights. I don't want you to not talk to each other, and that's a good thing. There's a community here that a lot of you come every night. But I can't read out all those comments, and I don't think you even want me to read out all those comments. And so I have to come up with a better way of either on the fly or somehow figuring out how to handle the comments. But let me give you this link here for the Coinbase if you are interested. And again, you don't buy a lot. It's not an investment. You buy a small amount, $100, and you get $10 extra. I get $10 extra. There's the link. And all right, let's move on from the pitching. All right, Tom Manley's here, Roger's here, Lance Deacon here, Pablo's here, Joel, Emily is here as well. All regulars on Smaulgld. Of course, Anne is also here. 10 mugs on Russia. That poor lady, she should have used Bitcoin. Well, that's I did make that point, Roger. Yes, indeed. That poor lady in general. I mean, I don't like when people act like, oh, Bitcoin solves the problems of the world, but in that case, it might have. Now, the other problem might have been people donated money for her, and then she put it into Bitcoin, and it went down, and she lost half her money. Then she couldn't have the operation. So, I'm not here promoting Bitcoin as saving the world. However, a prudent use of Bitcoin would have been she got all the money in pounds, she kept it in the bank account, but when she was ready to send it at that point, she could have converted it into Bitcoin and sent it. Now, she wouldn't have known that her bank was going to hose her like that, but all right. That's right. Pablo says, what if cryptos drop 20%? That's why you don't you convert it I mean, when you send me small amount, I don't convert it anymore. I used to convert it. But if you're going to have a large amount, obviously, you convert it into fiat, and then you hold, unless you're a speculator, and you want to take your chances with 250 pounds. 250,000 pounds is like $325,000. I don't think you want to leave it in Bitcoin, especially if you need the money to have an operation that costs almost $250,000. You don't want to take that chance. All right. Let's see. Lance. Only thing I could see is seizing people's land on the border. Yeah. And if they seize the land on the border, those are the people that have the standing to sue to try to stop Trump's national emergency. As I mentioned, and I hope that these guys are swift enough, and maybe they're not. Trump probably knows this because he's done eminent domain before. You don't say, I'm going to go build, and then say, oh, I was going to build. Can you take care of these people over here? They don't want to give up their property. I think that land along the border where they've already, I hope for their benefit, if they're going to build a wall, they should already have that cleared up. If not, those people have standing to stop the wall. And then the Napolitano, which he didn't make, argument would come into place in that property would be taken and that people then could refer back to the 1952 Steele case. But, all right. Roger says they want to invade Venezuela to steal all the zoo animals, cats, dogs, so the people starve. Okay. Yeah. It's all about the mugs, says Roger. Yes, Tom says if we want Venezuelan gold, we would just ask London for it. And they would give it to him. In fact, the fact that England or the Bank of England is not turning over Venezuelan gold is precisely because they know the United States is against Venezuela and has sanctions on it. And they don't want to screw up the United States. So if the United States went one step further and said, okay, give us the gold, I'm sure they would hand it over. Very good point, Tom. Problem is if Fort Knox became another COMEX without knowing. I don't know what that means. All right, silver stacker. Well, it's funny. I seen a video that someone was saying silver was worth 100,000 US dollars, cost in Venezuela. I was worth 1 million at the time. I told them I would sell 1 ounce to him for $100,000. Absolutely. It was Big Swear, maybe, says Roger. DB Stupid. If someone in Venezuela would send me a duffel bag of bolivars, I'd be happy to send them a couple ounces of silver. Hardly any deals on bolivars on eBay. Okay. Scott Wardell, a shift said Friday, the original income tax 16th Amendment was sold to us only as the rich and only 2% somehow became everyone. And I mentioned the same thing, 3 or 4 days ago as well, that Dizzy Miss Lizzie's plan, people get, that's how the income tax was sold to us. And it made the same point. That's not an original point. That's obvious. That's how the 16th Amendment was sold to people, that it's only for the rich. And the reason that's a smart thing is because you're all sitting here going, I don't have $50 million worth of assets. Yeah, what difference does it make to them? Yeah. And again, if you don't stand up for people on principle, you see, it's the same thing. It's the same really with everything. If it doesn't apply to you, but it could apply to you, then it really is directed at you without you realizing it. What they try to say is, oh, come on, you're never going to make $50 million. That's not the point. They may be right. Statistically, you probably never will make $50 million. Never see $50 million, even through your entire income period. You never have $50 million worth of assets. But that's not the point. The point is that it can go down to 25 million, 10 million, 1 million. Once you establish the precedent that somebody doesn't need the money that they've accumulated, that somehow Lizzie needs it to get elected, then there's a problem. So you're not defending millionaires and billionaires. They got all the money in this country. All right. Then she goes back with Kavanaugh in the beer days. Okay. Income tax is unconstitutional. So says Scott Wardell. Well, no, it's not. Because it was unconstitutional until they passed an amendment making it constitutional. That's the problem. And that's how you got health care passed through some legal trick that Justice Roberts came up with, was that no, the government, it's unconstitutional for the government to force you to buy any good or service. However, if you don't buy a good or service and they tax you, well, that's not a problem because the power to tax is constitutional as based on the 16th Amendment. How about that? I used to be a lawyer. That's how I know all this stuff. All right, what else here? Lizzie ought to hook up with Nathan, the mass media's latest storyteller. Well, at least he probably has more than 1/1024th Native American blood. Gold is God, says Nira Jan. Okay, didn't stop the Roosevelts. How much gold do you guys buy a year, Jack? I think you're asking someone in particular. All right. Peter Schiff makes me laugh. He was commending George Herbert Walker Bush, his life achievements and presidency. Really? That doesn't make any sense. All right. Jack AG, I love his quick-witted opinions, especially on Bitcoin. He makes good points, but does not see the advantage. Sure, Bitcoin isn't tangible, but is easily sent. Gold is tangible, but hard to send. That's exactly, I agree with that. And those are what people do is when they argue, they act as if something is dispositive. Well, you can't do anything with a Bitcoin, and it doesn't have intrinsic value, so therefore it's not worth anything because it's not gold. Okay? Well, that's a stupid argument because you could flip that around. Gold is not Bitcoin. Because you can't send gold easily from one place to the other or across international boundaries, then gold is worthless. Those types of arguments are very narrow-minded. They're very, as if, it's the same when people use the argument about the wall. The wall doesn't solve all immigration issues because there are immigration issues such as people overstaying their visa. Okay? That means don't build the wall. No, it doesn't. If the wall stops some people from coming in, even if 90% of the drugs come in through a port of entry, that doesn't mean you don't try to stop the drugs that don't come in through a port of entry. And how do you know it doesn't come in outside of the port of entry? You don't know. Because if it comes through the port of entry, at least you have a chance of seeing it. If it comes across the border and you're not watching and there's no wall there, how do you even know it comes across the border? So you have to assume you don't know. And if there's a way of walking across the border to do child trafficking, human trafficking, if you were going to do that, I would believe you would try to do that where there is no port of entry. So, just because a wall doesn't solve all problems doesn't mean, or you can put up a ladder or you can go around it. Yeah, of course. And the same thing with gold and Bitcoin. Just because Bitcoin doesn't have intrinsic value doesn't mean it doesn't have other value. What Bitcoin people try to do is they fall into the trap and they start arguing, it's got intrinsic value, it's a network and it's anti-fragile, and they say a bunch of BS to try to make sure that Bitcoin is everything. And the gold people will try to do the same thing. Everything has its pros and cons, and certain things it has, and everything has its deficits and its surpluses. But people, once they fall in love with a particular asset or concept, it's all surplus and no deficit. And then if the other thing that they're arguing about has a deficit, that makes the whole thing useless. No, Bitcoin, you can't make a necklace out of Bitcoin, so Bitcoin's not worth anything. It's actually moronic when you think about it. And these are smart people making these arguments, and they appear smart to stupid people. Sorry about that. A little wound up tonight. Hope you guys are wound up and appreciating this. I normally don't rant like that. I normally am pretty respectful of people when they make arguments, but I see a lot of moronica. And it's not just in the obvious. It's in the rhetoric. But then again, that's as old a trick in the tool kit. Going back, I mentioned the other night, we're talking about Cicero. It's all about making emotional arguments and having people nod their head and then thinking they are smart because this guy said it and he is smart and he knows about this and he called it, and whatever the person says is complete rubbish. I actually had an experience with this. Believe this or not, there was somebody who actually thought I was really smart. But not because I was smart, because I had done something academically. So they just assume, well, he must be smart. He made law review. He knows he's top of his class. He must know a bunch of stuff. And I noticed what this person would do is if he thought someone was smart and was credentialed, if someone said something, he would then repeat it as if he said it. Because he figured if that person said it, it must be a smart thing to say. So he'd go and say it. And one time I saw this guy do this. He heard somebody he thought was smart say something, but it was stupid. And he came into my office, and I had heard him hear this from that person. He came into me and he said, oh, such and such and such and such. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. Don't repeat that. He says, what? And he didn't. You can tell he was ready to say, but so-and-so said this. But he held his tongue because he wanted to make it look like he came up with it and he was the smart guy. And I explained to him why it was the stupidest thing, because it missed 2 points. And therefore, actually, it was the exact opposite of what he was saying. Then he realized, oh, he's really smart. Well, he must have more credentials than the guy. He's not listening to the words. He's just hearing who says it. So then what I used to do to mess with this guy, I used to just say stuff. Total gibberish. I would make up some economic theory that made no sense whatsoever and try to apply it to something he was doing. And then I would tell a few people in the office that I had just made this statement. And you let me know when this guy comes in and tells you, trying to appear smart, what I just said. No sooner had I finished saying some absolute ridiculous statement, I get a phone call. I said, yeah, what's going on? He goes, he's here. And I said, what do you mean he's here? He just said what you said. I said, no. So I think a lot of people need to think for themselves. They listen to these people and they really don't want to hear that the person maybe, they just assume, oh, I'm listening to a smart guy. And sometimes either the person isn't that smart, or if they are that smart, they know what they're doing. What they're trying to do is sell you something. Now, I only do that when it comes to mugs. Everything else, if I say something it's wrong, it's stupid, that's fine. If I say something smart, it's fine. But there's no motive there other than to try to get the analysis right. But when it comes to mugs, beware. Hold on to your wallet, because I will make up stories about mugs. So, just be careful. Lewis, do you think Lois Lane, add an E to my name and I'm Louise. Take the U out and I'm Lois. A lot of fun here. MK Hernus, do you think it's important for countries like the United States to own gold? Okay, how much? Too little. Is it important? I don't know. The United States runs the fiat system. And it's up to them to determine whether it makes sense for them to have gold. And if it makes sense, what doesn't make sense for them, if they're running a fiat system, is to be highlighting gold. That's why they don't want people to think of gold as part of the financial system. That's why Bernanke says, yeah, we have it because it's tradition. When Nixon took the United States off the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1971, he said, essentially, the dollar is not based, he didn't use these words, he never mentioned gold, he didn't say the dollar is not based on gold, because clearly it was. That was the Bretton Woods Agreement, that you can bring your dollars if you were a central bank to the United States and get gold. The dollar was based on gold. It was a dollar standard, but the dollar was backed by gold. And he said the dollar is based on the strength of the economy of the country, and the United States is the strongest economy in the world. Okay? So why would the United States want to highlight how much gold it had? Because what they're trying to push off is that the gold value, or the amount of gold that they have, is irrelevant. What's relevant is the United States is the most powerful economy in the world, irrespective of how much gold they have. Now, that mentality actually in the fiat currency system makes total sense. Why? Kazakhstan is like 50% of their currency backed by gold. Half the reserves are in gold. It's a horrible currency. Doesn't help them. Russia, we just saw that chart. They've added all that gold to reserves, and what happened? Nothing. The Russian ruble is not doing very well. It's not doing well at all. And it's because in a fiat currency, debt-based system, gold is not important. So, is it important for the U.S. to own gold? Obviously, it was important for them enough not to allow it all to be drained under Bretton Woods and to close the gold window. The question is, should they be adding more? I would say, why not? I mean, if you can print up hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars, you might as well buy something with it. You might as well buy some gold. But I'm not running the treasury. All right, let's see. I like to say, let's see. If Fort Knox is leasing the gold to, say, Britain or others become paper, then lend it 2 or 3 times over. They could do that, but guess what? That doesn't mean that that gold doesn't exist there. That doesn't mean that they can't regain control over that gold. I think the physical cash in Venezuela is actually scarce. We know what's scarce are the coins in Venezuela. So I heard if you go to Venezuela, because the coins have metallic value, they may be de minimis amounts, but nickel and copper are still worth something, or even zinc. If you get change in Venezuela, they give you like matchsticks or some other nonsense. All right. Native. Oh, Prashanti Girls here, another regular. Yep. Scott Wardell says, plus Sir Greenspan said we'll never need to go bankrupt, just print more money. Yes, he did indeed say that. There's no point in taxing us. Well, that's what I don't understand. Why raise money of tax if you could just print up let the rest of the world borrow, buy treasuries, and then just spend the money in the United States and take everyone's tax burden down to zero? Persanti girl, repeat your mug stories to all I meet. Spread the word about mugs. Mugs are rarer than gold. Mugs are money, period. You can stack mugs. Mugs can never go to zero. When the whole world realizes how valuable mugs are, Smaulgld mugs will go to $10 trillion. You need to buy mugs now. Better to be early than late. What else? All right. I think we're about done here. Okay. Well, I do want to thank everyone for joining me this evening, and we will see you tomorrow night. Maybe I'll do if I have time, do something in the afternoon. So be on the lookout for that. But generally, I like to keep I don't have much time during the afternoon. That'd be a short one. Probably no time for comments or questions, but if there's anything that happens during the day that's important, I'll do an update. Thanks, everyone.